Hey folks, I'm brownbear. Today I'll be talking a bit about the new reveal trailer for Age of Empires 4. If you don't know me, I'm formerly a top competitive player in both Age of Titans and Age of Empires 3, playing under the handle Parfait. The first thing that jumped out to me in this video was the transition to a three-dimensional engine. This is fairly unsurprising given that it's been the industry standard since Warcraft 3, but I don't think it's necessarily required. For example, They Are Billions is a good example of a modern two-dimensional RTS. I'll use StarCraft 2 as an example here because I think most people will probably already be familiar with it. First of all, here's an example of siege tanks arranged into rows. On the left and right hand sides, you'll see two vertical lines. Notice how the left hand line intersects with the bottom row, but not with the top row. In other words, the bottom row occupies significantly more lateral space than the top one. This is a result of the game world being three-dimensional and curved. This behavior also extends to the cursor. Here you can see that the point of no return of not being able to click on this building is different depending on where my camera is located, a difference of around 20 pixels. None of this is really that big a deal, it just takes some getting used to. This will be especially applicable for anyone switching over from Age of Empires 2. You could argue that a 3D engine looks better, so it's a worthwhile trade-off to make, but I'm not sure if that's necessarily always the case. Another thing I noticed was the overall large number of units on the screen. Initially, this gave me a bit of a Total War vibe. To be fair, it's hard to draw too many conclusions without having hard numbers on population caps and the supply cost of individual units. In principle, I think the total size of armies is less important than how it's balanced relative to cognitive load. Simply throwing more units on the screen isn't going to work without thinking through how the player actually manages all of their stuff. This is something I'll be paying attention to in future trailers and interviews, particularly the mental model the developers have in mind for how players spend their time from moment to moment. The reveal trailer also showcased some new features like units on walls and roads within a town. I think it's worth pointing out that Age of Empires historically has never featured bases that actually make logical sense. You have your economy and walls and military and so forth, but aside from the single-player campaign, it's never laid out like an actual town. The question I have seeing this stuff in the trailer is whether this has actually changed in Age of Empires 4. Maybe they're just showcasing a pre-built town from the campaign, and the game doesn't actually work like this in practice. Other possibilities are that the roads are just an aesthetic effect that automatically appear when buildings are created. It's also possible they serve an actual concrete gameplay function. The main reason I bring this up is to make the point that empire building was never one-to-one with making a logically consistent empire. Age of Empires worked because it felt like you were building an empire. It felt like you were managing a complex economy and a multifaceted military in a diverse and varied terrain. The series never needed to make your base actually look like a town to make you feel like you were constructing an actual empire. I hope this focus on player experience is something that Age of Empires 4 retains in its final release. Finally, the last thing I want to talk about is the actual setting. The gameplay trailer showcases what looks like the castle or imperial ages of Age of Empires 2. That implies Age 4 will have a similar setting, though it's possible it'll extend further forward or further back. In principle, I don't really have a preference here. I think that the Age formula could work in any setting. What I'm really interested to see is how borrowed concepts like trebuchets are implemented in Age 4, whether they inherit their original design or whether the game tries to reinvent their role and purpose. And that's everything I had for this video. The reveal was surprisingly short with relatively few details, but I'm more optimistic now than I was at the initial announcement. At the very least, the developers have done a good job respecting the core aesthetic of the series. You can screen cap any individual moment of this trailer and immediately recognize it as Age of Empires. That gives me hope that the developers have been similarly respectful in how they've approached gameplay design. Alrighty, thanks for watching. I'd love it if you subscribed to me here on YouTube, as well as followed me on Twitter and Facebook to catch all of my content. I primarily focus on writing nowadays, so you might be able to read some pretty cool articles. Anyway, the relevant links are in the description below. All the best, and see you next time.